For more than 2 centuries, the Persian Achaemenid Empire ruled over a territory unprecedented in human history. Founded by Cyrus the Great in the 6th century BC, it stretched from the eastern Mediterranean coast through Mesopotamia to the borders of India. With its sophisticated administrative system, a royal road more than 2,500 kilometers long connecting its provinces, and religious tolerance toward conquered peoples, the Persians were not only rulers but also civilization builders. But for all its power and longevity, the Achaemenid Empire was eventually overshadowed by a young genius from the west, Alexander III of Macedon, who would become known to the world as Alexander the Great. Alexander was born in 356 BC in Pella, the capital of the Kingdom of Macedonia, a kingdom in northern Greece. His father, Philip II, was a brilliant warrior and king who transformed Macedonia from a small state into an emerging military power. Alexander's mother, Olympias, was an Epirote and of royal descent from Achilles, a detail that Alexander himself would later exploit in building his image as an ancient hero. From an early age, Alexander was groomed to be a king and warrior. But what was even more special was the teacher Philip chose to educate his son. That was Aristotle, the great philosopher of ancient Greece. Under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander was trained not only in philosophy and science, but also in literature, mythology, and the ideal of a philosopher king. He studied the Iliad, taking Achilles as his role model and carrying a manuscript copy of it with him on his later campaigns. Along with his academic training, Alexander also joined his father in military campaigns. His talent did not lie dormant in books. At the age of 16, while Philip was away on an expedition, Alexander was made regent and successfully quelled a rebellion in Thrace. At the age of 18, he first commanded cavalry at the Battle of Chaeronea, a battle that decided the fate of Greece and played a key role in Macedonia's resounding victory. Philip II, who had united the Greek city-states under Macedonian leadership through the League of Corinth, was preparing a grand campaign to invade the Persian Empire. But just before he could set out, he was assassinated at a royal wedding. His death left a dangerous power vacuum. Alexander, then only 20 years old, was immediately forced to prove himself as he defended his throne amid intrigue and rebellion. Within months of his accession, Alexander acted with astonishing speed and ruthlessness. He eliminated any political threats at court and suppressed the Greek city-states that were plotting to break away from the alliance. The city of Thebes, famous for its tenacious resistance to Persia, now opposed Macedonia. Alexander showed no mercy. He marched, besieged, and razed Thebes, selling its entire population into slavery. Greece shuddered. Alexander's message was clear. Anyone who opposed him would be destroyed. In 334 BC, Alexander embarked on the greatest conquest of antiquity. He crossed the Hellespont, the strait that separated Europe from Asia, with an army of some 50,000 men, including phalanx infantry, companion cavalry, archers, javelin throwers, and a corps of engineers, an army trained by Philip himself. His goal was to overthrow Darius III, the king of the weakened Persian Empire, which still possessed a large army of hundreds of thousands of men. Alexander understood that this was not just a war of territory. It was a confrontation between two civilizations, the West and the East, and he quickly showed the world that he was no ordinary invader. The first battle took place on the banks of the Granicus River, where the local Persian guard and Greek mercenaries ambushed the Macedonians. Despite the unfavorable terrain and the advice of his generals, Alexander led his cavalry straight across the swollen river. The battle was fierce, but through his daring and use of mobile tactics, he won a resounding victory. Thousands of Greek mercenaries were killed or taken prisoner. The Granicus was his first victory, but it was also a bloody declaration of war against the entire Persian Empire. After this victory, Alexander continued to advance into Asia Minor, liberating Greek cities from Persian control. But he was not simply a liberator. Step by step, Alexander brought those cities under Macedonian influence, laying the foundations for a new empire, one in which Greece and the East would be united. In 333 BC, Alexander faced the great army of Darius III at Issus. Although outnumbered, ancient sources claim that Darius had over 100,000 men. Alexander took advantage of the narrow terrain of the coastal valley to neutralize that advantage. Once again, he led his cavalry straight into the center of the Persian formation, breaking the defenses and forcing Darius to flee, leaving both his queen and mother behind. The defeat was an undeniable humiliation for the Persian king. Alexander, showing his chivalry, treated Darius's queen and mother with kindness. He addressed them as royal, not insulting their honor, which further enhanced his magnanimity in the eyes of the Eastern people. After Issus, instead of marching straight into the Persian heartland, Alexander turned south into Egypt, the rich and strategic land of the Achaemenid Empire. The Egyptians, who hated Persian rule, welcomed him as a savior. There, Alexander founded the city of Alexandria on the Nile, a city that would become the greatest intellectual center of the ancient world. At the Siwa oasis, Alexander was recognized by the priests as son of Amun, the Greek equivalent of Zeus. From Titi, then on, he was not only king, but also one blessed with the gods, something he would use to unite power in both the East and the West. In 331 BC, Darius assembled his army one last time to confront Alexander on the plain of Gaugamela. With perhaps as many as 250,000 men, chariots, heavy cavalry, and elephants, Darius believed he could crush the young invader. But Alexander, with some 40,000 men, used a classic tactic. He stretched the Persian formation, weakening their center, and then delivered a decisive blow in the middle of the ranks. Once again, Darius fled. After this battle, no Persian force could stop Alexander. He advanced on Babylon, then Susa, and finally Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Persian Empire. There he burned the palace of Xerxes, a symbolic act of revenge for the burning of Athens during the Persian War. Darius was killed by his own generals while fleeing. When Alexander learned of the betrayal, he was furious and executed the traitor. He took the title King of Asia, married a Persian princess, donned the royal Persian robes, and began to rule as the king of the East. But Alexander was not done. He wanted to continue his conquest to the East, where the uncharted lands of Greece beckoned. Alexander crossed the Hindu Kush Mountains into what is now Pakistan and India. There he defeated King Porus in the Battle of the Hydaspes, a fierce encounter with war elephants, but his army, tired and homesick, forced him to stop. Still Alexander, planned new conquests heading for the Arabian Peninsula and beyond. But in 323 BC, while in Babylon, the city that had been the center of his enemy's empire, Alexander fell ill and died suddenly at the age of 32. The cause of death remains a mystery, fever poisoning or political intrigue. The vast empire that Alexander built quickly fell apart, for he had appointed no clear successor. His generals, called the Diadochi, divided the land among themselves and founded Hellenistic kingdoms like Ptolemaic Egypt or Seleucid Persia. But Alexander's legacy was not in maps, but in culture. Over the centuries, from Egypt to India, cities bearing his name sprang up. Greek became the language of science and philosophy, and the world entered the Hellenistic period, a time when East and West met and exchanged religion, art, and ideas. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating historical stories. See you next time. Let's continue exploring the past with us.